Hello, welcome, heroes and villains, to City of Heroes. It's back. It's 2019, 7 years later, after the closing in 2012. I played this for 4 years straight, um, and this is uh, my tutorial, my introduction guide to new players, because I've come across quite a few of them. And we're going to get in here and start with part one, which is covering just archetypes and each class, each character, each play style by itself. Let's get in and show you the ropes. So first you log in. I currently play on Excelsior. I'm going to show you my two characters. So here we are, and first we'll start from scratch. So create a new character, and this is your beginning stage right here. So you have five different origins. Uh, they themselves don't affect how your character performs. This is more of a role playing type of choice. So if your character has got a backstory of being a science mishap where he's gained powers because of some science problem, or mutation, magic, technology, or natural. I personally, because I'm not much of a role player, I choose science because of the enemy type that I like to farm. The enemy type I like to farm, they drop science single origin enhancements that help your character become stronger prior to enhancement origin sets, which will come later on in your playing. So I do science because I like to farm for single origin enhancements to help my next characters, uh, become stronger during the leveling, so you don't have points in your leveling where you are not being as helpful as you could. So I personally do science, but if you have a different enemy group that you like to farm for whatever reason because your build works better against them, go ahead, do mutation, do magic, just depending on what you face. Uh, and up here you have two different choices. You have City of Heroes Freedom, which is the main part of the game that has the most content in it, and this is where you can spawn in on hero side, Paragon City, or Rogue Isles, which is the villain side. Both sides are awesome. I've played through both. This other option here, City of Heroes going rogue, is Pretoria. It's an alternate dimension to the heroes and villains side. You have heroes that are bad guys here. You have bad guys who are heroes here. It's an alternate dimension. Different characters that you come across are different in this world. Pretoria only goes up to level 20. It looked like they were working on future content for it. But Pretoria it's beautiful. I think it's a little bit harder than normal content because of the enemy types that are there. But it's a good challenge. It's a good where to start. So then we're gonna continue on to playstyle and get into the bulk of this video. So here are the 6 different types of playstyles that the game presents to you to help you decide on what you want to play. I personally don't agree too much in this because there's a lot of overlapping in the styles. There's a few different styles that generally players like to ask for when you're trying to do a dungeon. In our case, a task force or a strike force. So you have the tank, you have damage, you have support, and you have control. And there's a lot of blending amongst the characters into those different categories. These 6 will help you choose what you want to play. So let's first go into tank. Tank is going to be the one that absorbs the damage and absorbs the aggro of up to 15 enemies around you. So the first is the tanker. plain and simple. They have the highest amount of survivability. They have a decent amount of melee, but they're not. You wouldn't call a tanker damage. They have a little bit of range, crowd control. Taunt itself is considered a crowd control. Some support, and in some cases pets. But most of the time it's just survivability and aggro control. Peacebringer is a epic archetype. When before the game closed, you actually had to earn a Peacebringer, so you had to hit 50 first before you can make a Peacebringer or a Warshade. Peacebringers and Warshades in human form or in squid form, which we'll go over that in build guides later, but they have a dwarf form that is a tank type of character. This is squid, that's human, and this is dwarf. So the dwarf is a tank of sorts. Warshade is the exact same way. It's just that Peacebringer is light energy, while Warshade is more of a Nyctus slash like shadow energy or negative energy, just depending on what game you come from. And then Brute is what used to be a villain side only archetype. We can now make them on hero side. Brutes are aggros slash tank of the villain side, but they're not as strong as a tanker, but they do a lot more damage. As you can see, their melee damage is at 9 versus tankers at 7, but you can also see the survivability went down by 2. A lot of people, if you really get really good at playing the game, majority of the times you don't need a tanker. Brutes are strong enough, especially with the right support, to do most of the content in the game. And that's one of the things about this game is we're not so reliant on a healer. Like a lot of MMOs nowadays, they make it so that healer is mandatory. Tanks are not aggro control anymore. They are a little bit more survivable. That's all they are. In this game, a tank is aggro. You are able to draw enemies to you and keep them around you, unlike others. So the next playstyle we're going to cover is melee damage. And as you can see, tank is also on this list. And Brutes is also on this list, but the additions here is Scrapper. Scrappers are full on melee damage. They have the highest DPS in the game for a single target. For one enemy, one-on-one, Scrapper is number 1 in melee damage. The crit, the ability to crit and double your damage, and to buff that. But then you also have Stalker. Stalker, just by the name, makes you think of a spike damage type of archetype. So they can hit hard, very on their first strike. They have what's called an assassin strike, but their damage in general is slightly less than Scrapper after that initial strike, and their survivability is not as strong as Scrappers. Scrappers and Stalkers, Scrappers are a little bit more tanky. They can take a little bit more damage. Their hit points are higher. They have a higher hit point cap than Stalkers do. Stalkers' hit point cap is low. And now we have the last two, Arachnos Widow and Arachnos Soldier. These are the villain side versions of Warshade and Peacebringer. And they are... Arachnos Widow is like a... It's like a Stalker slash Scrapper with sonic abilities. We'll go over that later when we go into each one more in depth. Arachno Soldier is more of a brute slash scrapper. They're not very tanky, but both Arachnos Widow and Soldier have great team buff abilities. They can really help out the overall power of everybody, not just themselves. Next is our range damage sets, and a lot of these have become stronger because of the most recent buffs that were going into the game prior to closing and now after closing. So now we have quite a few options. So Blaster is the quintessential range damage, hits you very hard but has like no survivability. So if you go here Blaster, they're at 4 survivability, but range is 10. Melee damage is 8 because of their secondary power set. Their primary is range. They are the hardest hitting archetypes in the game, and they are very squishy. But if you build them right, which we'll go over some Blaster builds in the future, I can make Blaster builds pretty tanky. Our next is a Defender. Defenders, as it says, it defends the team using buffs, debuffs, healing. There's a wide variety of abilities that they can do. In this game, like we were saying before, it's different than most MMOs. You could do some of the highest contents without any healers, and that's because of the types of buffs and debuffs that we have in the game that allows us to not need healers. One of the newest sets, one of the newest archetypes in this game since closing, this was created. This was created by someone during the secret server years. They wanted to make an archetype that was more like a tank mage. So this is a range slash melee primary set with a stalker-like survivability secondary set. So this is a class that is unknown to most people and can play the way that a lot of people like to play blasters. Next is the Corruptor. Corruptor is a villain archetype, and it's a ranged damage primary and a debuff buff healer secondary. And this is to a lot of players, this is the go-to archetype to play with a team, because it's not, the damage of it is a lot stronger than a defender, and its buffs and debuffs are good enough to not need a defender. So corruptors are very useful in strikes, task forces. So they're very much needed. And then again, Arachnos Widow and Arachnos Soldier. They're good on damage. They're a mix between melee and range. Our next playstyle is crowd control. Crowd control, I'm gonna keep saying this. This game goes a different direction than other MMOs. In other MMOs, controls don't last for very long. They feel like purely controlling a full mob is too much of a benefit to make that'll make the game easier. Here in this game is that they worked the enemies around the length and control of the controllers and the dominators. The difference between here is that controllers are control first, buff debuff healer second, so they can help control a mob and then keep their team alive with buffs and debuffs and stuff. Dominators, on the other hand, is the villain group, the villain side version of it. They are control first, and then assault second. Assault is a mixture between ranged and melee damage with a little bit of crowd control. It's an all-around secondary power set. The main difference between these two is that Dominators have an ability called Domination, to where if you build the character correct, their controlling abilities are twice as strong as a controller in domination form. So their controllers normally, when you hit a boss with a control ability, the boss is not controlled right away. You have to stack the power twice or 3 times or 4, depending on what you're hitting. Boss, elite boss, archvillain, monster, giant monster. Dominators, you can control higher level enemies quicker. It takes less stacks to get it. So when it comes to pure control, Dominators are the best. And getting permanent domination, which we'll go over in some builds that I'm going to run, is not hard, but you've got to know how to build the character, and I will help. I will help everyone trying to figure out how to build these characters. I will do videos on builds with an overview in the beginning, and then it will continue on with my process of how to build the characters to show you how I work the build in my head as I'm building it, to just show you what my thought process is. Now the next playstyle is support. We're going to see a lot more extra classes in here. So these are most of the same. Controller, we've gone over Defender, Corruptor, Arachnos Widow, Arachnos Soldier. Both underestimated. The newest one is Mastermind. Masterminds have lots of pets. They can control a lot of different pets. They can tell the pets to attack a certain target. They can tell them to move in different directions. They can go passive. They can go aggressive. Bunch of different types. They can go off on their own, and then if you need to pull them back, you can pull them back. You get a couple different extra powers for it. But the Mastermind class it itself is very squishy, but the Mastermind secondary is support, so buff, debuff, healer, so they can keep themselves alive by using their secondary powers. And the majority of their attacks, the majority of their damage comes from their pets. They themselves don't do a lot of damage. And when I do these builds, when I show you, is a lot of times I don't take the attack powers in the primary set. The primary set's the one that has the pets in it. Just simply because you just don't do enough damage to warrant losing a power slot that can be useful for something else. It depends on what primary set you use, but we'll go over that in each build. Now for the last playstyle, we're going to go into pets, and this is going to be all duplicates, but we have controllers, because controllers have a pet at the end of their primary. Some are different than others. I think one set doesn't have a pet. Masterminds is all pets. Dominators, same thing as controllers. They still have a pet. It's not the greatest pet in the world, and you can't control them. There's no controlling those pets. And the Arachnos Soldier's got a lot of different pets. Some more useful than others, but we'll go over that in different builds. And that's it for the playstyles and the archetypes. My name is Alien Mafia. This is the Mafia channel. You can find me in game at Alien Mafia, same thing. Give me a thumbs up, drop a like, subscribe. I'm new to this. I'm new to YouTube. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in part 2.